There is a truth so sharp, so piercing, that the narcissist spends their entire existence hiding from it. It is not the loss of you they fear. No, that would imply they were capable of love, of attachment, of a bond rooted in reciprocity. What they fear is far more primal, far more devastating to the scaffolding of their false identity. They fear losing control over you. For in their universe, you are not a beloved, you are not a partner, you are not a soul to be cherished, you are an extension, a puppet whose strings they tug to confirm their illusion of power. They are accustomed to your chasing your explanations, your apologies whispered through trembling lips, your pleas for forgiveness even when you've done nothing wrong. But then one day something shifts. You no longer chase, you no longer cry out into their void. You choose silence. You stand firm. You decide radically, courageously to love yourself instead of clinging to their crumbling throne. And in that moment, their entire false world begins to collapse like a stage set, exposed under harsh light. Your indifference is not hatred. Hatred still binds you to them, for hatred is still energy directed outward. No, your indifference is the most terrifying declaration: I am no longer a puppet in your game. And nothing wounds them more deeply. Nothing unravels them faster. For they can manipulate rage, twist compassion, exploit love. But indifference is unassailable. It is the mirror held up that no longer reflects their shadow play. And it is that mirror, or rather the shattering of it, that sends them spiraling into panic. Do you know what happens when you stop chasing a narcissist? First comes panic, a panic that is not ordinary anxiety, but the profound terror of an ego stripped of oxygen. For have you noticed, a narcissist only feels secure when they control the rhythm of your emotions. They walk away coldly, vanish without a word, abandoning you in confusion, and yet beneath their performance they need you still waiting, still yearning, still hurting for them. They want you chained by longing, tethered to their absence. But one day, when you stop sending messages, stop rehearsing explanations, in the hope they might listen, when you stop shedding tears for someone who never saw them, that is the day they suffocate. Because a narcissist does not live on love. Love requires mutual recognition of humanity, a dance of vulnerability and truth. They live instead on supply, your reactions, your emotional outbursts, your desperate words. Every message, every confrontation, every tear is their lifeblood proof they still matter, that their fragile ego still casts a shadow upon your soul. And when you go silent, you cut the wires. You leave them in an airless room, a stage with no audience, a kingdom without subjects. For the first time they must hear the echo of their own hollowness. And they panic. This panic is not just about the loss of energy. It is about the collapse of the narrative they have so carefully scripted. The narcissist is a director obsessed with control. They hand you a role, the pleader, the chaser, the one who must fix and soothe and beg. When they walk away, you are meant to chase. When they blame, you are meant to absorb and repair. When they sulk, you are meant to coax them back into the light. But when you refuse, when you set down the script and step off the stage, the entire play crumbles into dust. Their world is built on control, and without an actor to control, they are left staring at the empty theater of their life. Here Jung's insight pierces through the veil. For what does the narcissist flee if not the encounter with the self? Their entire persona is a mask crafted to hide the emptiness within. They use you as a mirror, hoping your love, your sacrifice, your endless forgiveness will convince them they exist, that they are valuable. But when you walk away, that mirror shatters. And in the shards they are forced, however briefly, to glimpse the shadow they have long denied, the emptiness, the fragility, the unloved child within. And nothing terrifies them more than this confrontation with their own inner void. The panic you witness is not just about losing you, it is about being abandoned by their own reflection. As their panic grows, you will see the chaos writhe within them. They swing wildly between guises, the pitiful weakling begging for compassion, the raging accuser spitting venom at your cruelty, the sweet lover suddenly fluent in the very words you once longed to hear. But you must understand all of this is theater. Behind the costumes, behind the trembling voice or the honeyed tongue, there is no real love, no genuine remorse. There is only fear, the fear of a performer who has lost the audience, the fear of a parasite deprived of its host. Their panic is a mask worn over emptiness. And here lies the paradox. Their panic is proof of your strength. For as long as you were chasing, as long as you were explaining, reacting, pleading, the game continued. But the moment you fell silent, when you reclaimed your peace, you stepped out of their labyrinth. You broke the cycle. You may think you are weak for not responding, for not fighting, for not trying again. But it is precisely your silence that is the deadliest strike. It is silence that announces you are free. And isn't this what Jung described as individuation, the process of breaking away from the unconscious grip of another's shadow to discover your own wholeness, to withdraw projections, to cease being the mirror for another's unhealed wounds, and to turn inward toward your own self? In that act, you are no longer a character in their play. You are the author of your own story. So, if you are here trembling at the threshold of silence, remember this: you do not need to prove your love through chasing. You do not need to prove your worth through clinging. To stop is not cruelty. To stop is liberation. When you stand firm, when you hold peace in your hands as your birthright, you declare to the world, I am whole, I am worthy, and I will no longer play in someone else's illusion. And it is then, precisely then, that the narcissist falls into the panic they will never dare to admit. For they cannot manipulate silence. They cannot twist calm. They cannot dominate someone who no longer plays. Your strength is the quiet refusal. Your freedom is the rejection of their script. And your silence, paradoxically, is the loudest truth they will ever hear. After the panic of losing control, the narcissist does not surrender. They never truly let go. Like an actor unwilling to leave the stage, they change costumes, shift the lighting, and return with a new performance. And the role they slip into now is one of weakness, fragility, and desperate need. They play the victim. This is perhaps their most cunning disguise, for it does not strike at your anger or challenge your pride directly. Instead, it slithers toward your compassion, the softest place in the heart of anyone who has ever loved too much. They know that somewhere in you lives the healer, the forgiver, the one who has always wanted to save them from themselves. And so they collapse into pitiful tones. I have no one left. Only you understand me. I regret everything. Please don't abandon me. These words drip with the memory of who they once pretended to be, the one you loved so fiercely, the one you once believed could be redeemed if only you gave enough. But hear this clearly. Their performance is not for healing. Their pain is not a doorway to change. It is a tool, a tactic, a net cast over your empathy to reel you back into the cycle. They do not seek forgiveness to grow, they seek it to bind. They do not mourn the harm they caused, they mourn the loss of convenience. When you were there, you were more than a lover. You were their anchor, their mirror, their inexhaustible reservoir of energy. They drained you without hesitation. And now, facing the silence of their own emptiness, they want nothing more than to reopen that well. Here again, Jung's insight into archetypes reveals the truth. The narcissist cloaks themselves in the archetype of the wounded child or the forsaken lover, not because they wish to confront that reality, but because they know it compels you to step into the archetype of the rescuer. They bait your compassion, hoping you will once again forget your boundaries and confuse sacrifice with love. But remember, this drama is not about healing the wound. It is about preserving their power. Their victimhood is a mask that hides the tyrant beneath. If you are not careful, their tears will awaken your doubts. You will ask yourself, am I being too cruel, too heartless? Maybe this time they really regret it. You will feel the old pull of guilt, the ache of your own tenderness, the temptation to surrender your peace for one more chance at saving them. And yet, what has experience taught you? Did they not already have countless chances? Did they not watch you cry, watch you beg, watch you break, and remain unmoved until you finally walked away? True remorse does not wait until love is lost to awaken. True love does not suddenly appear only when supply is gone. The danger of their victim mask lies in how it distorts your memory. You remember the times you believed in them, the moments you told yourself love could fix the fractures in their soul. You remember the warmth of their early charm, the intensity that first drew you in. And so when they appear fragile, something in you aches to return to that beginning. But beware. The narcissist's fragility is not an open wound, longing for healing. It is a weapon sharpened into chains. If you fall again, you will find yourself back in the same prison, only more subtle, more suffocating. Watch their actions. When they claim to regret, do they speak of your pain or only their own? Do they name the wounds they inflicted, or do they drown you in tales of their misfortune? Do they take responsibility, or do they shift the blame, weaving narratives where you are always the harsh one and they are always misunderstood? Look closely, for the truth lies not in their tears but in the silence around your own suffering. Jung wrote that projection is the unconscious act of placing one's denied traits onto another. When the narcissist plays the victim, they project their refusal of responsibility onto you, forcing you to carry the burden of guilt for walking away. They twist the archetype of the martyr, hoping you will sacrifice yourself once again at the altar of their unhealed shadow. But individuation demands something else. It demands you withdraw the projection, recognize the manipulation, and reclaim your compassion for yourself. To set a boundary does not make you cruel. To walk away from manipulation does not make you heartless. On the contrary, it is proof of growth. It is the voice of the self within you whispering, "Protect the peace you have fought so hard to reclaim." Your compassion is not a leash for others to bind you. Compassion without wisdom is exploitation. Love without boundaries is captivity. So when they return cloaked in weakness, take a deep breath and remember the nights you cried alone, the times you were blamed for their storms, the hours you felt invisible in a love that devoured you whole. Do not let their new mask erase the cost you paid. Forgive if you must, for forgiveness is a gift you give your own soul, a release of bitterness. But do not confuse forgiveness with permission. You may forgive and yet never allow repetition. You may care and yet never open the door again. And in that refusal you teach yourself a profound truth. Kindness must be married to discernment. Love must walk hand in hand with awareness. The narcissist may continue acting spinning tales of tragedy and frailty, but you no longer need to be their audience. You have left the theater. The stage is empty. The performance echoes into nothingness. And what remains? You standing firm, no longer needing to prove your love through sacrifice, no longer measuring your worth through suffering. You are free to love yourself with full dignity. And in that choice, in that simple, unshakable choice, you shatter one of their most powerful weapons. For they cannot bind you with guilt when you have chosen peace. They cannot chain you with pity when you have chosen truth. And that is when their victim mask crumbles. Not because they admit it, but because it no longer works. Their tears no longer reach you, their pleas no longer sway you. And the silence that follows is not the silence of cruelty, it is the silence of freedom. After the mask of victimhood slips, when pity fails to lure you back into orbit, the narcissist enters their most volatile stage, the spiral of emotional chaos. It is here that their inner fractures, long concealed behind performance, erupt in contradictions too wild to contain. This is not merely anger or sorrow, it is the raw unraveling of a psyche that has lost its anchor. On one side, they are desperate to reclaim you, to pull you back into their gravity, for without you their reflection has vanished. On the other, they rage at your audacity to step beyond their control. Love and hatred, longing and resentment, craving and contempt. These opposites collide within them, not as a dialectic seeking synthesis, but as a storm without direction. A storm that rips through every attempt at order. They want you close, and they despise you for daring to walk away. Their inner world becomes a battlefield, and every interaction with you is a weapon thrown into the fray. You will see this chaos in the whiplash of their behavior. One moment they send words dripping with sweetness, promises of change, declarations that you are unforgettable, irreplaceable, the one soul who truly completes them. And if you resist, if you remain silent, the sweetness curdles into venom. They accuse you of cruelty, of becoming cold, of abandoning them heartlessly. The very qualities they once claimed to adore are now rewritten as proof of your betrayal. This is the narcissist's double bind, their desperate attempt to trap you between longing and guilt. But it is not love. It has never been love. It is hoovering, a psychological strategy named for the vacuum that sucks you back into their cycle. They deploy every tool at once. Sweetness to stir your nostalgia, anger to provoke your defense, tears to awaken your guilt. Each reaction you give, no matter how small, is tested, measured, weighed for its potential to rebind you. And if you yield even a little, they take it as an opening proof that you are not yet free. Here Jung's concept of the shadow again rises to the surface. The narcissist projects their chaos outward, making you the stage upon which their inner war plays out. Their anger is not truly about your silence. It is about the silence within themselves. Their longing is not truly for your love. It is for the reflection you once provided. Their hatred is not truly directed at you. It is the hatred of their own weakness, denied and hidden for so long. But because they cannot face the shadow within, they cast it onto you, demanding that you hold it for them. In this way, their emotional chaos is not simply erratic. It is an unconscious ritual of projection, a desperate attempt to avoid looking inward. And yet there is a dangerous seduction in their storm. The intensity can feel like passion, the tears like sincerity, the anger like proof that you mattered. For those who have lived in the orbit of a narcissist, chaos becomes familiar, and familiarity can be mistaken for love. But true love is not a battlefield. True love does not demand you bleed to prove its depth. Chaos is not the remnant of love. It is the residue of dependence, of fear, of a void too deep to fill. In their desperation, many narcissists rush to find another host, another partner, another mirror, to reflect their imagined significance. They dive headfirst into new relationships, not from love, but from fear. They cannot sit in the silence, cannot face the hollow chambers of their own soul, and so they attempt to stitch another mask, another stage, another cycle. But because the wound within is unhealed, because they refuse responsibility, these new bonds rot quickly. And with each collapse, they sink deeper into their spiral, torn between chasing what is lost and resenting what they cannot control. Do not be deceived. Their chaos is not proof of how deeply they loved you. It is proof of how profoundly they depended on you. They cannot bear losing supply. They cannot face the truth of their own emptiness. And so their storm rages louder, hoping to drown out the silence. For you, this stage is perilous. Their accusations may pierce your heart, stirring doubt. Their sweetness may awaken old longing. Their tears may ignite guilt. And yet if you step back into their spiral, you will find yourself again, exhausted again, drained again, sacrificing to fix what was never yours to fix. The spiral is endless, for they have no intention of healing. They want only to avoid the stillness where truth waits. And here lies your choice: to step back into their chaos or to let it remain theirs. If you return, the cycle resume's charm turns to blame, to silence, to chaos, until you are once again trapped in their theater of suffering. But if you stand firm, if you refuse to be swept into the storm, you break the cycle completely. True strength is not in arguing louder, not in matching chaos with chaos. True strength is the silence of self-mastery. Silence that does not beg, does not defend, does not perform. Silence that is not born of fear, but of peace. Jung wrote that individuation is the path of integration, the path of withdrawing projections and facing the shadow. When you refuse to be consumed by their chaos, you are no longer a projection screen. You are no longer a pawn in their inner war. You are an individual, whole and unshaken, and nothing terrifies them more. For anger they can twist, love they can exploit, guilt they can manipulate. But silence, calm, unyielding, unreactive silence, renders them powerless. In that silence you reclaim your freedom. In that silence you step into the self. So, when the spiral begins, when their storm rages, remember, it is not your responsibility to heal someone who refuses to face themselves. The spiral belongs to them. It is the cage they built with their own hands. Your task is not to free them, but to free yourself. And when you choose peace over chaos, silence over reaction, truth over illusion, you have already won. At last, when the storm has exhausted itself, when panic, victimhood, and chaos have each failed to bind you, there comes a strange quiet. Not peace, for the narcissist does not know peace, but a hollow recognition that their arsenal has lost its power. They may still try to circle back, to provoke, to lure, to sting, but something fundamental has shifted. You no longer play, and in that refusal the entire edifice of their control crumbles. Here your journey diverges from theirs. They remain trapped in repetition and denial, in the desperate refusal to face the shadow within. You, however, step into something infinitely larger, the path Jung called individuation. For in withdrawing from their games, you are not merely breaking free from a toxic bond. You are reclaiming the fragments of yourself that were scattered in the performance of saving, proving, and sacrificing. Think of it: every time you chased, you abandoned a piece of yourself. Every tear shed for them was water stolen from the roots of your own soul. Every explanation given, every argument endured, every plea for recognition was an offering laid upon an altar that never once returned your devotion. In leaving the cycle, in embracing silence, you are gathering those fragments back. You are calling yourself home. The narcissist will sense this, though they will never name it. To them, your silence feels like exile, like abandonment, like death. But to you, it is rebirth. It is the first breath of autonomy, the dawning recognition that your worth is not dependent on another's gaze. You are no longer defined by being their mirror, their supply, their stage. You are defined by your own being radiant and whole. Culturally, this moment reflects something beyond the personal. We live in an age where relationships are often commodified, where love is mistaken for possession, where control masquerades as care. The narcissist is not just an individual pathology, they are a mirror of society's shadows, our collective hunger for validation, our fear of insignificance, our addiction to appearances. To step out of their cycle is, in a way, to step out of the cultural spell itself. It is to say, I will not be consumed by a world that feeds on my reactions. I will not measure my value by how much I give to those who take without end. I will live otherwise. Jung taught that the self, the wholeness of who we are, is not discovered in clinging to illusions, but in breaking them. The collapse of the narcissist's game is paradoxically the opening of your individuation. For when you stop being their puppet, you confront the silence not with panic, but with courage. You learn to sit with your own company. You learn that peace is not the absence of noise, but the presence of authenticity. And in that silence, you meet yourself perhaps for the first time. Does this mean the journey is easy? No. Walking away from a narcissist often feels like stepping into an abyss. Doubts arise. What if I am cruel? What if I am unlovable? What if no one ever sees me again? These doubts are the echoes of their control, the shadows they planted in you. But every time you resist the urge to return, every time you breathe through the guilt and refuse to answer the performance, you strengthen the ground beneath your feet. You step more firmly into your own being. And here is the truth. Your silence is not emptiness. It is not cruelty. It is not indifference in the hollow sense. Your silence is sacred. It is the language of dignity, the poetry of self-respect, the music of freedom. It tells the narcissist, and more importantly, yourself, I am whole. I am worthy. I am no longer defined by suffering. In this silence, you may discover something else, others who have walked this path before you. For though the narcissist convinces you that you are alone, you are not. Millions have stood at the same threshold, trembling, torn, uncertain, and they too have chosen themselves. They too have found light beyond the labyrinth. This is the collective unconscious at work, the archetypal journey of breaking free from false gods, of slaying the dragon, of control, of returning with the treasure of selfhood. In choosing yourself, you align with a story older than any single life. You become part of the great human journey toward wholeness. So remember, you need not shout your strength. You need not prove your freedom with dramatic gestures. The truest strength is quiet. The deepest victory is simple. It is the act of walking away and not turning back. It is the decision to forgive without returning to care, without sacrificing yourself to remember, without reopening the wound. When the narcissist realizes you are no longer swayed, they may lash out one final time, desperate to see if anything still binds you. But this time, you do not flinch, for you have seen the truth. Their panic was never about losing you, only about losing control. Their victimhood was never about healing, only about regaining power. Their chaos was never about love, only about avoiding emptiness. You have learned the great lesson: you are not responsible for healing someone who refuses to face themselves. Your only responsibility is to love yourself fully. And in that love you become untouchable, not in arrogance but in wholeness. You no longer need the illusion of false love, for you have found the reality of true love, the love that begins within and radiates outward, without demand, without chains. So if you find yourself standing where so many have stood, trembling but resolute, know this: you are not walking away into darkness. You are walking toward the light of your own soul, and in that light there is no puppet, no stage, no game, only you, free and worthy of a love that does not consume but creates. This is the greatest victory. Not a victory for the world to applaud, not a victory the narcissist will ever admit, but a victory etched deep into the fabric of your being. The victory of saying without words, but with your entire life, I choose myself.
There are capabilities within the human experience that transcend the ordinary gifts that do not appear on resumes, are not taught in universities, and are often dismissed by the modern materialistic world. Yet these capacities have the power to transform lives and access dimensions of reality that the majority of the population never perceives. Carl Jung, one of the most profound thinkers of the 20th century, spent decades studying what he called superior psychic functions. These are not superpowers in a comic book sense, nor are they magic tricks. They are latent capacities inherent in the human structure waiting to be unlocked. However, they are developed and integrated only by those who have undertaken the arduous work of the interior journey. If you have ever felt that you are perceiving the world differently than those around you, or that you are tuned into a frequency that others cannot hear, you are not imagining it. Jung argued that these are natural developments of a psyche that is reaching towards individuation, the process of becoming whole. But he also issued a stern warning: these gifts come with a heavy price. They require a psychological stability that few possess, and without it, they can lead to ego inflation, isolation, or delusion. Today we are going to dissect the 5 specific signs that indicate your psyche has developed these rare gifts. We will look at them through the rigorous, analytical lens of Jungian psychology to separate genuine spiritual insight from mere fantasy. But before we unlock these signs, we must understand the vessel that holds them. Jung was a man of science, a psychiatrist, yet he recognized that the materialistic view of the universe was fundamentally incomplete. He studied phenomena like telepathy, precognition, and what he termed absolute knowledge of the unconscious. He did not view these as supernatural violations of natural law, but as the workings of a deeper layer of nature, the unus mundus, or one world, where the separation between mind and matter begins to dissolve. If you are watching this, it is likely because you have experienced things that logic cannot explain. You are looking for a framework to understand your own mind. Let us begin with the first and perhaps most unsettling indication that your psyche is operating on a different level. Sign number 1, the burden of direct knowledge, or gnosis. The first sign that you possess a developed spiritual gift is that you frequently know things about people, situations, or future trajectories without any logical evidence to support that knowledge. Jung referred to this as knowledge acting through the unconscious, or simply gnosis. In our standard operating mode, we rely on the function of thinking and sensation. We gather data through our eyes and ears, and we process it using logic. If A equals B and B equals C, then A must equal C. This is how the majority of the world navigates reality. It is linear. It is safe. It is slow. But for you, the process is different. You meet a stranger for the first time, and within seconds, a complete picture of their internal state floods your awareness. You don't just see their smile. You feel the specific weight of the grief they are hiding behind it. You walk into a room where an argument happened hours ago, and the air feels physically heavy, charged with a specific type of aggression that you can almost taste. You think of a friend you haven't spoken to in years, and a sudden urgency grips you, a knowing that they are in danger, only to find out later that at that exact moment they were in a crisis. Society often labels this as oversensitivity or dismisses it as coincidence. But Jung took it very seriously. He proposed that the human psyche is not a closed system sealed inside the skull. Instead, at its deepest level, it merges into the collective unconscious, a vast subterranean ocean of information that connects all living beings. When your psyche develops the gift of gnosis, the walls of your conscious ego have become permeable enough to let this information filter through. You are tapping into a network. It is not that you are guessing, it is that you are accessing a file that is already present in the collective field. Jung documented multiple cases where this absolute knowledge defied statistical probability. He experienced it himself regularly. He would know the intricate details of a patient's secret life before they spoke a word. He explained that space and time are relative to the psyche. The deeper you go into the unconscious, the less bound you are by the constraints of here and now. However, this gift is often experienced as a burden before it is recognized as a gift. Why? Because you cannot turn it off. You walk through the world, constantly bombarded by the truth of things, while everyone else is playing a game of social polite fiction. You see the lie in someone's eyes while they are speaking words of love. You feel the impending failure of a project that everyone else is excitedly building. This can lead to a sense of profound isolation. You may have learned to shut your mouth, to hide what you know, because when you speak your intuition, people look at you with confusion or fear. They ask for your evidence, and you have none. You only have the certainty of the sensation. If this describes your daily reality, you must understand you are not crazy. You are functioning with a high degree of what Jung called intuition, a perception that looks around corners and sees the seed of the future in the soil of the present. The challenge for you is not to doubt your knowing, but to learn how to hold it. The undeveloped psyche uses this knowledge to judge others or to feel superior. The developed spiritual psyche uses this knowledge to navigate with compassion. You know the truth, not so you can expose them, but so you can understand the depth of their struggle. Sign number 2. The resonance of the healing field. The second sign is subtler, yet it is often the one that others notice before you do. It is the phenomenon where your mere presence seems to catalyze healing calmness or transformation in others without you actively trying to fix them. Jung observed that certain individuals possess a psychic gravity. When you are around them, the chaotic elements of your own mind seem to settle. You might find that total strangers open up to you in grocery stores or on a public transit, telling you their deepest traumas within minutes of meeting. Friends seek you out, not necessarily for advice, but just to sit with you when they are falling apart. This is not because you're a therapist. It is not because you have the perfect words. In fact, you might say very little. It is because of who you are. Jung explained this through the mechanism of the wounded healer. This is an archetype, a universal pattern of behavior. The wounded healer is not someone who is unbroken. On the contrary, it is someone who has been deeply broken, who has descended into the darkness of their own suffering, faced their own shadow, and done the work to integrate those fragmented parts back into a whole. When you have done this work even partially, your psyche emanates a vibration of integration. In a world that is fractured, anxious, and dissociated, a person who has achieved a degree of internal union acts like a tuning fork. When a dissonant, anxious person comes into your field, their psyche unconsciously tries to match your frequency. This is called resonance. You provide a container, a temenos, or sacred space where it is safe for others to feel their own suppressed emotions. Because you are not afraid of your own darkness, you are not afraid of theirs. You do not flinch when they express pain. You do not rush to offer platitudes like, "It will be okay," just to make yourself comfortable. You can sit in the fire with them. However, if you possess this gift, you likely know its shadow side. Exhaustion. If you are not conscious of this dynamic, you become a psychic sponge. You absorb the unintegrated debris of everyone around you. You might leave a social gathering feeling physically ill-drained or suddenly overcome by emotions that do not belong to you. This is the classic struggle of the empath. Jung's solution was not to build walls, but to strengthen the self. You must recognize that while you facilitate healing, you are not the source of it. You are a channel. The moment your ego steps in and says, "I am healing this person," or "I am their savior," you pollute the field. You take on a burden that is not yours to carry. True spiritual power in this context is the ability to be present without attachment. It is the capacity to hold space for another's transformation while remaining grounded in your own center. If you find that people change simply by being near you, if animals and children are inexplicably drawn to your calmness, if you are the stabilizing anchor in every storm, you carry the archetype of the healer. Your duty is to maintain your own hygiene psychologically and spiritually so that your waters remain clear enough to reflect the truth back to those who look into them. And this brings us to a crucial pause. The journey of integrating these gifts is not a solitary one, though it often feels that way. We are building a community here of individuals dedicated to the rigorous exploration of the psyche, moving beyond surface-level self-help into the depths of what it truly means to be human. If you are recognizing yourself in these descriptions, if you feel the resonance of these words, I invite you to join us. A simple interaction with this content, like a subscription, is a signal to the algorithm. Yes, but more importantly, it is a signal to your own psyche that you are ready to take this knowledge seriously. It connects you to a network of others who are walking this same path of individuation. We have explored the burden of knowing and the power of presence. But the next signs take us even further into the realm where the fabric of reality itself seems to bend around the psyche. We are going to discuss the architecture of your dreams and the mysterious phenomenon that Jung considered his most controversial discovery. Sign number 3, the perspective function of the dream world. We move now from the waking world to the landscape of the night. The third sign that your psyche has developed a superior capacity is that you receive information through dreams that later manifests in physical reality with chilling accuracy. Most people view dreams as mental garbage disposal, a chaotic replay of the day's anxieties. But for you, the dream state is different. It is a library. It is a communication center. Jung revolutionized modern psychology by proving that dreams are not merely reactive. They are creative. He identified what he called the perspective function of the unconscious. He observed that the unconscious mind has a perception of time that is vastly superior to the conscious ego. It can perceive the trajectory of events, the subtle seeds of cause and effect that have been planted long before they sprout into visible reality. If you possess this gift, you know the difference between a processing dream and a big dream. A processing dream is foggy, fragmented, and fades quickly. But a big dream, a perspective dream, hits you with the force of a physical event. It has a texture, a color, a hyper-reality that is more vivid than your waking life. You wake up from these dreams not just remembering them, but altered by them. Perhaps you dream of a massive tidal wave destroying your childhood home, and 3 weeks later, you are hit with an emotional crisis that wipes out your old sense of security. Or more literally, you dream of a specific conversation with a person you haven't seen in a decade, and the next morning the phone rings. This is not magic. It is a function of a highly integrated psyche that is listening to the whisper of the pattern. Jung famously analyzed his own dreams to predict the outbreak of World War I. He saw Europe drowning in blood in his visions months before a single shot was fired. His unconscious had aggregated the collective psychic tension of the continent and presented it to him in a symbol. If you are tracking your dreams, if you are seeing the future unfold in the theater of your sleep, you are accessing a layer of the psyche that stands outside of linear time. But this gift requires discipline. The undeveloped mystic takes every dream literally and becomes paranoid. The developed soul learns the language of symbols, understanding that the unconscious speaks in metaphors even when it is predicting the future. Sign number 4, the architecture of synchronicity. If the previous signs were about perception, this fourth sign is about the very fabric of reality interacting with you. You experience synchronicity with a frequency and intensity that defies all statistical explanation. This is perhaps Jung's most famous and misunderstood concept. He defined synchronicity as a causal connecting principle. It is a meaningful coincidence where an inner psychic state, a thought, a feeling, a dream, coincides with an external physical event, and there is absolutely no causal link between them, yet they are connected by meaning. We are not talking about thinking of a red car and seeing a red car. That is the reticular activating system of the brain. That is biology. We are talking about the moments that make your blood run cold with awe. The moments that feel like the universe has turned its head to look directly at you. You are wrestling with a profound philosophical question about death, and a book falls off the shelf in a bookstore opening to the exact page that answers your query. You are at a crossroads in your life, asking for a sign, and an animal behaves in a way that is scientifically impossible, delivering a message that only you could understand. Jung's classic example involved a patient who was stuck in her rationalism. She was telling Jung a dream about a golden scarab beetle. At that exact moment, a rare insect, a rose chafer beetle, the closest European equivalent to a scarab, began tapping against the window of Jung's office. Jung caught the beetle, handed it to her, and said, "Here is your scarab." That moment shattered her rational defense and allowed her healing to begin. If you live in a world where these coincidences happen weekly or even daily, it is a sign that the barrier between your inner world and the outer world is thin. You are living in the unus mundus, the one world. For the ordinary person, the inner world is subjective and the outer world is objective, and they never meet. For you, they are two sides of the same coin. Your internal shifts ripple out and move the external furniture of your life. However, this is the most dangerous gift of all. The danger is what Jung called apophenia, the tendency to see connections where there are none. The ego, desperate to feel special, can start interpreting everything as a sign. The traffic light turned red, so the universe wants me to stop my job. No, that is just traffic. True synchronicity has a quality of numinosity, a feeling of the holy, the strange, the undeniable. It does not stroke your ego, it often humbles you. It reminds you that you are a character in a much larger story. If you possess this gift, your task is to walk the razor's edge, to remain open to the mystery without losing your grounding in the mundane. Sign number 5. The capacity for altered states and active imagination. The final sign is the natural ability to enter expanded states of consciousness without the use of substances, extreme practices, or trauma. In ancient traditions, this was the mark of the shaman. In Jungian psychology, it is the capacity for active imagination. Most people are locked firmly in the beta brainwave state alert, logical focused on survival. To shift out of this, they need alcohol, drugs, or extreme exhaustion, but you have a backdoor key to the unconscious. You can sit in silence and within moments descend into a state where the imagery of the mind becomes three-dimensional. You can hold dialogues with aspects of your psyche, your shadow, your anima, or animus, as if they were real people sitting in the room with you. You can access memories that do not feel like your own, perhaps tapping into the ancestral memory bank that Jung believed we all inherit. You might experience moments of unus mundus, where the boundaries of your ego dissolve and you feel a terrifying yet ecstatic oneness with nature or the cosmos. These are what Maslow called peak experiences. For the undeveloped psyche, these states are a one-way ticket to psychosis. The walls crumble and the ocean of the unconscious floods in, drowning the ego. This is the madness that Jung treated in the asylum at Burg Hölzli. As he famously said, the mystic swims in the same ocean in which the psychotic drowns. The sign that this is a gift and not a pathology is your ability to return. You can dive into the depths, retrieve the pearl of insight, and surface back into the daylight of rationality to pay your taxes. Do your dishes and speak to your neighbor. You have a flexible ego, not a shattered one. You are the amphibious being capable of breathing in both the water of the spirit and the air of the material world. The Great Warning. The Trap of Inflation. If you have nodded along to these 5 signs, if you recognize the gnosis, the healing presence, the perspective dreams, the synchronicity, and the fluid consciousness, then you are indeed carrying a heavy weight of potential. But we cannot end this discussion without the most critical lesson Jung ever taught regarding these matters. It is a warning written in fire. Possessing these gifts does not make you better than anyone else. It does not make you a saint. It does not make you chosen. And it certainly does not make you a guru. Jung saw countless individuals destroyed by what he called mana personality, or psychic inflation. This happens when the ego identifies with the archetype. You confuse the power flowing through you with your own power. You start to believe that you are the healer. You are the prophet. You are the special one. This is the birth of the spiritual narcissist. We see them everywhere today, leaders who demand worship, influencers who claim to have the only hotline to truth. They have genuine gifts, yes, but their ego has hijacked those gifts to build a monument to itself. Jung warned that the higher the spiritual development, the darker the shadow. If you have the capacity for great light, you have an equal capacity for great darkness. The moment you think your gifts make you superior to the unawakened masses, you have fallen. You have failed the test. The true mark of the spiritual gift is humility. When you really see the magnitude of the collective unconscious, when you really feel the power of the self, you do not feel big. You feel small. You realize you are just a tiny vessel for a vast ocean. Your job is not to show off these gifts. Your job is to be a clear window, to clean the glass of your own neuroses, your own traumas, your own biases, so that the light can shine through you without distortion. So what do you do if you are this person? You do the work. You stop looking for validation from a culture that is blind to these things. You find the others, the few who speak this language. You study. You ground yourself. You chop wood and carry water. You use your gnosis to understand, not to judge. You use your healing presence to serve, not to control. You listen to your dreams to navigate, not to escape. You respect synchronicity as a dialogue with the divine, not a party trick. If you are ready to stop hiding these parts of yourself and start integrating them into a functional, powerful life, then you are in the right place. This channel is dedicated to that process of integration. I want you to leave a comment below, not for the algorithm, but for yourself. Write down which of these 5 signs resonates most with you. By writing it down, you are acknowledging it. You are bringing it out of the shadow and into the light. The world does not need more magicians. It needs integrated human beings. It needs you to be whole. Thank you for watching. Do the work. Become who you are. Have you ever stood at the edge of your own existence and felt not a scream, but a silence so profound it echoed louder than any noise you'd ever heard? Not the silence of peace, but the silence that comes before the earthquake. A stillness trembling with the awareness that something within you has shifted, though you can't yet name what it is. That moment, haunting and sacred, is the beginning of your spiritual awakening. Not a joyful celebration, not a radiant revelation, but a slow and unsettling erosion of everything you once thought you were. You begin to feel like a stranger in your own life. What used to excite you now feels hollow. What you once defended with passion now feels absurd. You wake up next to people you no longer recognize, living a life you didn't consciously choose. And it's not that the world has changed, it's that something inside you has. That's how the first stage begins, not with clarity, but confusion. Not with light, but with a disorienting darkness. It is the stage of unconsciousness ruled by the ego, the false self, and it is the foundation upon which almost every human life begins. Here you are not living. You are reacting. You are not choosing. You are being driven. Every emotion controls you. Every opinion owns you. You wear your identity like armor, convinced it protects you, when in truth it only buries you. You live inside stories. I am a success. I am a failure. I am lovable. I am broken. But these are not truths. They are masks inherited from childhood, from culture, from pain. The ego does not ask who you are. It tells you who to be. It wants certainty, control, and validation. It seeks pleasure and avoids pain. It wants to be right more than it wants to be free. In this unconscious stage, your ego is the master, and you are its obedient servant. You mistake your thoughts for truth, your emotions for identity. You believe that every wound defines you and every desire is worth chasing. And worst of all, you believe you are separate from others, from the world, from the divine. You see others not as they are, but as mirrors of your own pain or projections of your unmet needs. Your relationships are not sacred. They are transactional, built on expectation and fear. You don't love, you attach, you cling, you demand. And in return, you are hurt, abandoned, betrayed. Life feels hostile, unfair, chaotic. You say things like, "Why does this always happen to me?" but never realize that the me it keeps happening to is a mask, not your soul. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." In this stage, fate feels cruel. You blame others. You blame life. But what you don't yet see is that your suffering is not a punishment. It is a whisper from the soul begging you to wake up. And yet even here in the thick fog of ego, something sacred stirs. Maybe it's a breakdown, a loss, a betrayal so deep it leaves you gasping for air. Or maybe it's something quieter, a feeling that you're not truly alive, that your laughter is rehearsed, your dreams borrowed. That subtle ache, the longing for something more real, is your soul knocking. But the soul doesn't yell. It waits. It waits for you to stop numbing, stop running, stop pretending. And when you finally do, even for a moment, you catch a glimpse. A crack in the facade. A split second of presence. And suddenly, the world looks different. Not because it changed, but because your eyes did. This is not enlightenment. This is not joy. This is the ground trembling beneath the temple. You don't yet know where you're going, but you know you can't stay here. That is the beginning of the descent. Spiritual awakening doesn't begin with rising into the heavens. It begins with falling into yourself, into the places you've avoided, into the pain you swore you'd never feel, into the silence you were too scared to sit with. And only those brave enough to fall will ever rise in truth. This first stage is not about becoming someone new. It's about realizing you were never who you thought you were. The ego must shatter before the soul can speak. And so the journey begins, not on a mountaintop, but in the ruins of your own illusion, in the quiet chaos of a self-unraveling. The fall doesn't stop when you notice the illusion. That's merely the invitation. Once the illusion is exposed, what follows is not liberation, it's collapse. The collapse of the world you once trusted. The unraveling of beliefs that gave you comfort, even if they were cages. And that collapse is not symbolic, it is existential. This is the second stage, ego death. It is not poetic, it is not peaceful, and it is certainly not optional. It is the tearing down of every idea you've ever had about yourself, about the world, about God. The voice that once said, "I know who I am now," whispers, "I have no idea." And in that terrifying honesty, something sacred begins. But first comes the void. After the illusion breaks, there is no instant clarity. There is only silence, the kind that deafens. The ego begins to die, but like a cornered animal, it doesn't surrender quietly. It claws. It bargains. It masquerades as humility when it's really fear. It says, "This can't be happening," even as your entire inner structure crumbles. This stage is disorienting because the tools you once used, logic, ambition, identity, achievement, are now useless. What do you do when you can no longer identify with your name, your job, your body, your past? Who are you without your trauma? Who are you without your achievements? Who are you when no one is watching and nothing is left to prove? These questions don't bring answers. They bring silence. And that silence is not the absence of meaning. It is the space where meaning begins to grow. But it grows in soil rich with grief, Because you are not just letting go of an illusion, you are letting go of an entire lifetime of self-deception. You grieve the version of you who tried so hard to be enough. You grieve the identity you defended like a castle, but now see was built of sand. You grieve your false self, and no one tells you how much it hurts to lose something you were never meant to be. Carl Jung spoke of this confrontation as a death not of the body, but of the constructed identity that shielded you from your shadow. He said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. This is that pain, the agony of unbecoming, of standing naked before the fire and knowing you have to walk through it alone. But something else begins to happen. Amidst the ashes of the ego, something ancient and quiet begins to stir. It is the observer, the self, behind the self. You begin to realize there's a part of you that watches your thoughts but is not your thoughts. A part that feels emotions but is not enslaved by them. That silent presence, that still awareness, is who you really are. It is not loud, not dramatic, not hungry for attention. It does not seek to be right. It seeks only to be whole. When you touch that place within you, even for a breath, a wave of peace washes over you. Not happiness, not euphoria. Peace the kind that cannot be taken because it was never built on anything external. It's the peace that comes from knowing you are more than your name, more than your story, more than your scars. You realize the ego is not evil. It is scared. It was built to protect you from pain, but it also protected you from truth. And now, in this stage, you can finally forgive it. You can thank it. And then you can let it go. But beware, ego death is not a one-time event. It is a spiral. It returns in layers. Just when you think you've transcended it, it reappears subtler, smarter, cloaked in spiritual language. It says, "Look how awakened you are." It seduces you into superiority. This is the trap believing the ego dies once. In truth, it evolves, and your task is not to destroy it, but to integrate it. To hold it with compassion, not hatred. Because what you reject controls you, but what you love, even in darkness, begins to heal. In this second stage, you are stripped of falsehoods, but not left empty. You are invited to meet the raw, unedited truth of yourself, the divine beneath the distortion. You begin to understand you were never broken. You were buried, and now as the rubble falls away, the soul begins to remember its own name. Not the one given at birth, but the one whispered before you arrived. This is not rebirth yet. This is the funeral of who you thought you were. And funerals, when done consciously, become sacred rites of passage. Once the ashes settle and the ego lies in pieces on the floor of your soul, a hunger begins to rise, not for food, not for pleasure, not even for answers, but for truth. Real truth. Not the kind offered in sound bites or spiritual slogans, but the kind that burns, that humbles, that transforms. This is the third stage, the search. It is not a casual curiosity. It is a hunger that consumes you. Something deep inside you begins asking questions you can no longer ignore. Who am I beneath all this rubble? Why was I born into this body, this era, this chaos? What is God, and is it something distant, or is it the breath moving through me right now? Every surface-level answer feels insulting. Every old belief now tastes like stale bread. You begin to tear down everything you once worshipped: institutions, teachers, even your own thoughts, because none of it satisfies that ache. You aren't searching for knowledge. You're searching for remembrance. Not for something new, but for something eternal that you forgot while trying to survive. In this stage, books become portals. Silence becomes a companion. The forest becomes a church. You begin to see symbols everywhere, the way the sun hits a leaf, the way a child laughs, the way your breath softens when you stop thinking. You realize the divine doesn't just live in temples, it lives in stillness, in heartbreak, in the breath between sobs. You begin exploring meditation, journaling, energy, work, ancestral healing, dream interpretation, not as spiritual trends, but as desperate attempts to connect with something that feels real. You start to see yourself as a student of life again, humble, open, unknowing. The arrogance of certainty dies, and in its place, reverence grows. You no longer want to be right, you want to be true. And you start to sense that truth is not found in facts, but in alignment, in resonance, in the subtle. Yes, your soul whispers when something feels sacred. But the search is not linear. It loops. Some days you feel lit from within, glowing with insights and clarity. Other days you collapse under the weight of your own questions. You doubt everything, especially yourself. You wonder if you're going crazy. You wonder if this awakening is just another illusion. These moments are not failures. They are rites of passage. Because real truth is not handed to you, it is carved into you. Through loneliness, through silence, through sitting in the fire of not knowing until the illusion burns away. This is where you learn the difference between information and transformation, between consuming spiritual content and becoming spiritually conscious. Carl Jung warned that the search for self is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming whole. And wholeness requires confrontation. You must face your projections, your shadows, your attachments to being good or special or enlightened. And yet, even as the ego tries to hijack the journey and turn it into a performance, something deeper begins to take root. Discernment. You begin to feel the difference between spiritual ego and authentic awakening, between chasing transcendence and embodying presence. You start noticing when your spiritual practices are rooted in fear, fear of not being enough, fear of being judged, fear of staying asleep. And you begin to gently let go of the performance. You stop needing to convince anyone of anything. Your search becomes quieter, deeper, more embodied. You no longer seek to escape the world, you seek to meet it more fully. You want to feel everything, the grief, the joy, the rage, the awe, because now you know that everything is sacred when seen through the lens of soul. This stage is where the outer world often begins to shift. Old friendships fall away. Conversations feel hollow. You may feel isolated, even misunderstood. But solitude becomes sacred, not because you don't need people, but because you are learning to sit with yourself fully nakedly, honestly. You begin to meet your inner child, your inner critic, your inner warrior, your inner mystic. You realize you are not one thing. You are a constellation of archetypes, all seeking integration. And that realization becomes the compass for your search. You no longer just want truth, you want union. You want to live in such deep alignment with your soul that every word, every step, every relationship reflects the sacredness within you. The search is not about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It's about peeling back the layers of fear, shame, conditioning until all that remains is essence. Radiant, raw, real. And then, as if whispered by the stars themselves, you begin to feel it. The shift, subtle but unmistakable. A quiet knowing that you are no longer searching from emptiness, but from fullness. You are no longer looking for truth outside yourself. You are becoming it. The books, the teachers, the practices, they were not the answer. They were reminders, mirrors, echoes of something that was always within you. You are not the seeker anymore. You are the sacred. And though the path continues, you now walk it differently, not to arrive somewhere, but to embody what you've already touched. The search is not over. It never truly ends. But it transforms from desperate grasping to devoted becoming. When the search quiets, not because the questions have been answered, but because your soul has begun to speak louder than your mind, something remarkable starts to happen. It is not an explosion, but a slow unfolding, like a flower blooming in a forgotten field, untouched by time or judgment. This is the fourth stage, the emergence of the authentic self. And it is not what you imagined. It is not triumphant. It is tender. You don't arrive in glory, you return in silence. You return to yourself, not as who you were told to be, but as who you have always been beneath the masks, beneath the trauma, beneath the noise. For the first time, you begin to feel whole, not because you've become perfect, but because you've stopped pretending. This emergence is not loud. It doesn't seek attention, it seeks alignment. And in that alignment, a strange kind of rebellion takes root, not against others, but against the falsehoods you once bowed to. You begin to speak your truth, even when your voice shakes. You say no to what dims you. You walk away from what you once clung to, not out of anger, but out of reverence for your own light. And people around you may not understand. They may call you distant, cold, selfish. But what they don't see is that you are no longer abandoning yourself to keep others comfortable. You are no longer sacrificing your truth to play roles that were never yours. This is not cruelty. This is sacred preservation. The self that emerges here is raw, ancient, and untamed. It is the wild child who existed before shame was learned, the one who laughed too loud, cried too hard, dreamed too big. That child returns, but this time with wisdom, with boundaries, with fire in the eyes, and peace in the bones. You stop asking for permission. You stop auditioning for love. You stop performing for applause. Your worth no longer lives in the hands of others. It returns home to your breath, your heartbeat, your sacred presence. You begin to dress how you feel, not how you're expected to. You begin to write, paint, build, and express without caring who claps. Creativity flows not from ego, but from soul. You live not to impress, but to express. And that expression is medicine for you and for the world. Because when one person becomes fully themselves, it liberates something in everyone else. You stop looking for someone to save you. You stop trying to save others. You realize that the most loving thing you can do is become whole, because from that wholeness, everything you touch becomes more honest. But make no mistake, this stage is not easy. It often brings upheaval. Jobs become unbearable. Relationships feel false. The life you built before awakening starts to fall apart, not because you failed, but because it no longer fits. You begin to purge what is not aligned, even if it once felt essential. The home, the career, the partner, the identity, all of it may shift, crumble, or be stripped away. And this time, you don't resist. You let it fall. Not out of numbness, but out of clarity. You've tasted your soul, and now anything less feels like betrayal. And so you walk away sometimes with tears, often alone, but always in truth. You trade comfort for integrity. You choose loneliness over falseness. And slowly, you begin to rebuild, not a life that looks good, but a life that feels true. Internally, this stage is equally seismic. Old wounds rise not to torment you, but to be transmuted. You meet the ghosts of your childhood, the abandonment, the rejection, the silence, and you hold them. Not to wallow, but to integrate. You stop asking, why did this happen to me, and start asking, what is this trying to awaken in me? You begin to reparent yourself, to speak to the child within with tenderness, to stop abandoning them the way others did, and something magical happens. You stop self-sabotaging. You stop chasing love that hurts. You stop betraying your body, your instincts, your needs. The authentic self does not thrive in suppression, it thrives in sacred space. So you begin to create that space through rituals, boundaries, silence, movement, art. You become the guardian of your own light. Your body also begins to shift. You may feel energy moving in unfamiliar ways. Tingling pressure, dreams that feel like messages. Your intuition sharpens. You sense things before they happen. You feel emotions in your body that belong to others. You're not losing your mind. You're tuning into the soul. Your nervous system begins to regulate differently. Your tolerance for inauthenticity disappears. And as the false layers shed your true energy, begins to radiate not the curated charisma of performance, but the quiet power of presence. People feel it when they're near you. Animals, children, strangers, they sense it. Because energy doesn't lie, and yours now speaks of truth. This emergence is sacred. It's not about fixing yourself. It's about finally being yourself. It's not about enlightenment as an escape. It's about embodiment as a homecoming. You stop striving. You start listening. You stop proving. You start trusting. You stop dissociating. You start inhabiting your body, your choices, your voice. And the world begins to meet you differently, not always kindly, but authentically. You begin to attract those who recognize your soul, not just your image. Relationships deepen or end. Either way, clarity grows. Because now you value resonance over attachment. You know that connection without truth is bondage, and you are done being bound. This stage is where many finally begin to taste freedom. Not the freedom of escaping responsibility, but the freedom of no longer being at war with yourself. You wake up, and your first thought isn't dread. You look in the mirror and don't flinch. You speak and don't shrink. You dream and don't apologize. This is not arrogance. This is alignment. The self that emerges here is not superior, it is surrendered. Surrendered to the truth that you are not here to fit in. You are here to become whole, to become radiant, to become a living embodiment of the soul's quiet fire, and in doing so, you give others permission to do the same. This is how we change the world. One authentic being at a time. And then after the storms have passed, after the illusions have shattered and the masks have burned, after you've sat alone in silence long enough to remember the sound of your own soul, something extraordinary begins to take shape. Not a climax, not an ending, but a new kind of presence, soft-grounded luminous. This is the fifth stage, alignment. And it's not what the world told you enlightenment would look like. It's not euphoria, not escape, not constant bliss. It's not the absence of pain. It is the sacred ability to hold all things, the joy and the sorrow, the beauty and the horror in your heart at once, and not break. It is the peace that comes from no longer needing to be anyone else, anywhere else doing anything else. It is the embodiment of your essence moment by moment, breath by breath. In this stage, you're no longer performing for love. You are love. You are no longer chasing purpose. You are purpose. You don't need titles or labels. You don't need to convince or convert. You simply live in alignment with your truth, with your body, with your soul. You no longer fracture yourself to meet others' expectations. You no longer contort your voice to fit into rooms that were never built for your becoming. You no longer trade authenticity for belonging. Because now, you know any place that asks you to shrink is not your home. Alignment means you walk in integrity even when it's inconvenient. It means you say no without guilt. You say yes without fear. You rest without shame. You create without approval. You feel without apology. You no longer need to be understood. You need only to be real. And something strange happens. Life begins to respond to your inner wholeness. Not always in the ways you want, but in the ways you need. People who match your frequency begin to appear. Synchronicities guide your path. The right conversations, the right opportunities, the right silences they find you. Not because you control them, but because you've stopped blocking them with your false self. You begin to trust life. Not because it's easy, but because you are no longer at war with it. The battle within you has quieted. The noise has softened. You hear the wisdom in your breath. You see the sacred in the mundane. You feel the divine in the ordinary. Alignment turns life itself into a meditation, a prayer, a canvas for your soul's deepest expression. Relationships change too. You no longer cling to people out of fear. You love them freely, release them gently. You understand that everyone is on their own journey, and you no longer make their pain your responsibility. You stop rescuing, stop fixing, stop enabling. You let people meet their own darkness, not because you don't care, but because you finally do in a way that respects their sovereignty. Compassion no longer means self-abandonment. Forgiveness no longer means tolerating abuse. You love with boundaries. You give without depletion. You hold space without losing yourself. And when someone no longer aligns, you bless them and walk away. Not with bitterness, but with grace. You don't need closure, you are the closure. This stage is where spiritual maturity ripens. You stop chasing peak experiences. You start valuing peace. You stop looking for signs because your whole life becomes the sign. You don't need the universe to scream anymore. A whisper is enough. A breeze, a gut feeling, a quiet knowing. You begin to sense the interconnectedness of all things, not as a theory, but as a lived reality. You feel the sorrow of the earth in your bones. You feel the joy of the stars in your chest. You begin to walk differently, speak differently, listen differently. Because you are no longer reacting from fear, you are responding from essence. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This is that privilege. Not wealth, not status, but self, naked, whole, radiant. You realize that the journey was never about becoming someone new. It was about unbecoming everything that wasn't you. And now here in this stillness, you begin to truly live. You wake up in the morning and greet your soul before your phone. You speak to yourself with kindness before the world can judge. You tend to your body like a sacred temple. You move through your day not rushed, but reverent. You fall asleep not in fear, but in gratitude, not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer running from yourself. And here is the greatest paradox. Of all the moment you stop striving, you begin evolving faster than ever. Not because you're trying to grow, but because you're no longer resisting what already wants to grow through you. You realize that you are not the seed, you are the soil. Life moves through you. Spirit breathes in you. The divine creates with you, and you become a vessel for healing, for truth, for beauty, for love. You are no longer the seeker. You are the space in which seeking ends. And still, the journey continues. There are still shadows to meet, still wounds to heal, still layers to shed. But you are no longer afraid. You are no longer asleep. You are awake not in the eyes, but in the soul. And in that awakening, everything changes. Not all at once, not without pain, but with purpose, with grace, with presence. And that is what it means to live in alignment, not to escape the world, but to embody your truth so fully that even the world begins to change in your presence. You become a living prayer, a lighthouse in a foggy world. Not perfect, not enlightened, but real. And that perhaps is the most sacred thing a soul can be.